Good morning and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to look at lenses, and this is actually something that I would do even if I wasn't doing a video. I've got my lens lineup almost complete for this year, for 2022, and I'm interested myself in which of these lenses give me what character, what look, what sharpness, just to confirm it. I mean, although I've used all of these lenses in dozens of weddings, I've never done a proper test to find out which ones are sharper than this, which ones give me better background blur, which ones are better for bright lights in the background and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to dedicate half an hour or an hour. The video won't be that long, but I'll test these lenses in a real world situation. This isn't photographing some card or something and zooming in and pixel peeping. This is real world. What do these images look like normal size? I will zoom in to find the sharpness, obviously, and let me just deal with sharpness, because if you watched any of my videos you know that I'm not a huge fan of super sharp images when you zoom in at 100%. The overall image quality to me is more important. But there is a level at which you need to get the sharpness to. It needs to be sharp enough. Once you get beyond that point, then that's the point I'm not worried about. But we do need to get to that level. And I just want to make sure that all of these lenses, and I'll be testing them wide open and stop down to, I think f2.5. I'm going to shoot, so wide open, which for many of these will be 1.4 or 1.8. But I will shoot at 2.5 as well, because that's an option when I'm at a wedding. If I want a shot that's more sharp than more character, maybe a headshot, portrait shot, something like that, where the background really is incidental and it's going to be more about the sharpness, then I will simply stop down to 2.5, get that shot at 2.5. And I want to know what these images look like. So the lenses we're going to be looking at, and some of these are more for interest for me than you probably, but the 18 to 35 zoom lens, the 50mm 1.4G, the 35 1.8G, the 24 to 70 Tamron 2.8 VR lens. And now we get onto the big boys. My horribly expensive 58 1.4G. I bought, now let me just digress just for a moment. There's one lens I'm missing, which is the 50mm 1.2 AI manual focus lens. I did a video about that a few weeks ago, about how I went and sold it, and I shouldn't have done. I made a big mistake. I've bought another one from China. It's on its way here. It's been stuck in customs for about a week. I don't know when it's going to arrive. I was going to wait until that arrived, but I think I'll now do a separate video on that particular lens when it arrives. And I bought this, the 58, last year in the hope and expectation, because lots of YouTubers said so, that this gives as good a quality image as the 51.2. I'm not convinced. Maybe I will be after this experiment today. It's a beautiful lens. It's 1,650 quid, so it should be a good lens. We'll compare that to the 1.4G 50mm, because that is about a quarter of the, less than a quarter of the price of this lens. So it'll be interesting to see how those two work out. The 85 1.4G, and finally the 200, the 135 f2D defocus lens. I'm going to be shooting these on the Z5 on a tripod using manual focus. It's not about testing the AF performance of the camera. It's about making sure I've got absolutely spot on autofocus and it not autofocus, focus, and the best way to do that is manual focus. With the Z5 I can zoom in. I've got a setting on there for manual lenses, so I can just press a button, zoom in, make sure I've got absolutely perfect focus, get the shots. We'll have a look outside at the setup I've got to actually shoot with, and then I'll do the shots, and then we'll come back into Lightroom and we'll go through these shots, look at how sharp they are, look at the character, which is very important, of each of these shots from all of the lenses, and I hope you find it useful. Let's go outside and do it. Okay, so here we are outside. We have the camera on a tripod, so I'm going to get no shaking, nothing to detract from the sort of image quality and image sharpness and so on. And over my shoulder here we have, I'm not sure of her name, anyway, my models for today. Now let me just show you what I've actually done with my model. I'm not going to actually be focusing on the printed face here, because it's not really going to give you a very good idea, because the print quality isn't fabulous on the face and that kind of thing. We're actually going to focus on, I've got an eyelash stuck on here, and that's what we're going to focus on. When I'm taking shots of people, the sort of defining thing is when you zoom in to see if it's a sharp image, can you see the eyelashes? What do they look like? What does the eyeball look like? And we've got a textured material here, so we can see that texture, and hopefully that will give us an indication of what the depth of field is, because it's curved. And also, of course, for perfect sharpness, we've got the eyelashes, which we can look at as well. We've got background, obviously, which is a mix of different things. We've got a lot of dew on some of the plants and the fencing out the back. We've got bright background there. We've got some trees over in the distance. So we've got a nice mix. It should give us an interesting photo as far as composition. No, not composition, elements in the photo. Let's do the shots and then we'll go and look at them in Lightroom. So, welcome to Lightroom. Here we have our photos, and the first thing I'm going to do is run through fairly quickly all of the shots we did with the different lenses, just to see what the overall look is like, what the character is. We'll zoom in and just check the sharpness, and then we're going to go into a bit more detail about the 50mm versus the 58mm versus the 85 versus the 135. Okay, so this is the, as you can see, the 18 to 35 zoom lens at 35mm. Let's just zoom in. This is zooming to 100%. And remember, for this lens, I'm really not looking for perfect sharpness. It's just popped into focus. But we've got extremely good sharpness. I can see, you know, all the fabric there. I can't count the individual eyelashes, but we're not close enough to do that anyway. I mean, I can see at the end here individual eyelashes, so that for a general purpose wide angle zoom lens at 35 is absolutely fine for me. We'll now look at that same lens at 18mm, and I really like this. I like the perspective. I like the wide angle look. Certainly works in this shot. I like the colours. I like the shade over this side. We've got the sky. It's not blown out. Great. I mean, what you can expect at 18mm in terms of sharpness, I've got no idea. That's just popped in, and I mean, I can't see every linear eyelash, but I can see every bunch of strands very easily. We haven't really got any texture here, but come on, it's an 18mm shot from about, I was probably about 8 or 10 feet away. Right, next lens, 35mm. No, it wasn't. I lie. It's the Tamron 24 to 70 2.8 lens. Now, one thing that really jumps out at me is the image quality, the look. Okay, look at the colours on this, how lovely and warm these oranges are. By the way, what I've done processing wise is I've applied my basic preset, which is something I apply to everything. I put a bit more texture and clarity, drop the highlights, lift the shadows, white balances as shot, and that's really about it. So when we look at the Tamron zoom lens, as you can see, I've done nothing differently. That's exactly the same as the previous shot, but the colours are just so yuck. It's just so dull. I don't like it at all compared to the 18mm there. It's just a totally different ballpark. Anyway, so clarity, sharpness at 24mm is, let this pop into focus, is actually really good. And obviously we're shooting at this is at 2.8. I can't get down to 1.4 or even 2.5 obviously, but at 2.8 24mm the sharpness is amazing. But this is a thing about modern lenses. The Tamron 24-70 is a in quotes modern lens, a modern design, and it's, I don't know, its aim seems to be sharpness. If we look at the 70mm shot and zoom in on that, again we're going to find this is wonderfully sharp once it pops in. Yeah, it is. It's very good indeed. But I still don't like the image quality as much as Nikon lenses. However, moving on, we've got the 35mm and we're back to the nice colours again and a nice drop off in I like some vignetting on my lens. I don't do architecture shots or landscape where I need edge to edge sharpness and no vignetting and all this kind of stuff. I actually like the character that I get from Nikon lenses. From F-mount Nikon lenses. I believe, I've never tested one, but I believe from what I see that the Z-mount lenses, the new ones, are much more like the Tamron that we just looked at. I believe they're sacrificing some character for sharpness, my view from what I've seen. Okay, so the 35 at 1.8 just popped into focus. Perfectly adequate for a 35mm lens. I'm very happy with that, no problems whatsoever. At 2.5, the look, let me just swap back so you can see that we've got a bit more vignetting at 1.8, and for me it's got more character at 1.8 than it has at 2.5. Should we need a bit more sharpness? Let this pop into focus. That's just popped in. We've got a little bit more sharpness at 2.5, I guess. But again, this isn't the sort of lens that I would use on shots where I need super sharpness. Moving on, 50mm. Now this is the 50mm 1.4G lens. I think the list price on Nikon's site is about £350. UK. That's at 1.4, and I really like that. That's a, for me, that's a lovely shot. And the sharpness is everything I could want. You've got all the texture on the material here. I can see at the end of this eyelash we've got individual eyelash there. I can make that out. Yep, perfectly okay. 2.5 look. Let me just actually go into reference view. So we've got the 2.5 one here and the 1.4 here. I do prefer the 1.4 shot, I have to say. For me, it's got that character that I'm looking for to give my clients. I do like that. So I will be shooting as I have in the past at 1.4 rather than 2.5. I'm willing to sacrifice the tiny amount, in fact let me look at that as well, at the tiny amount of sharpness So at 2.5 here and 1.4 here, and I was playing with this earlier, and actually on the reference view here, for some reason Lightroom isn't giving me, it's not rendering the image correctly. If I swap them over, you would see that this actually looks very, very similar. Why isn't it doing that? Okay, so I don't know why it does it. I've swapped them around, the 1.4 now here, the 2.5 here, and also in reality they're both almost exactly the same colour, but Lightroom for some reason is making the reference view a totally different colour. I'll have to look at that later. Sharpness wise, so 1.4, 2.5. I don't know, is there a huge difference? Yeah, okay, the 2.5 is sharper. Is it something I'm going to worry about? No. Right, let's move on. So we're now moving on to the 58. I love that photo, and if we stop down to 2.5, it does change, and I do prefer, again, the look of the 1.4 rather than the 2.5. It's just my taste in photography. And again, you must forgive the misrepresentation here on the reference side of the colours. If we go back to the 1.4, that is a tiny bit dark. Let me just... I did adjust every photo before doing the video for exposure, and the way I do that, because they were off a tiny bit, if you take the crop overlay here and choose your subject, what do you want to be perfectly exposed, and in this case it's that area there, you will then get the histogram showing you exactly the exposure of just that area. So I adjusted most of these so that the top of the histogram was just inside the middle third of the histogram there, and if you then hit escape twice, you just jump back to the image as it was, but it's now exposed correctly, or as you want it, for the particular part of the image that you're looking at. There's a slight change also in the white balance as well. That's due to the camera. I'm not going to bother changing that around too much, but it's got to be the 1.4 image for me is the favourite. The way this body stands out against the background just is a bit more. I like the colours better at 1.4. I like the drop off in light, the vignetting. Okay, moving on. Let's go to the 85. And at 1.4, again, I just love the character. Sharpness wise, what more could you ask? Again, absolutely fine. It's worth mentioning, as I said before I took the photos, I used manual focus for this exercise, and it's interesting when you're doing manual focusing, just how critical it is to get the focus correct. And what we expect these days of cameras autofocus, certainly at 1.4 and 1.8, is it's remarkable how well cameras do actually, because when you're manual focusing and you're zoomed in, I was zoomed in fact when I zoom in on the camera, it's probably more like the actual image I saw was probably more like that. And if you breathe, it's on the tripod. I'm just hoping this is going to pop into render properly. That's about as good as we're going to get, I think. Actually, in the viewfinder, as I say, it's even more zoomed in than this. And if you twist the focus ring and you get the red peaking coming up, the focus peaking coming up, and it comes up first of all on this back edge here, and almost literally, if I breathe, it's moving back and forth here. If I try to do this handheld, I could not handheld get perfect focus on these eyelashes. Just the fact you're standing and you're moving, you know, a millimetre back and forth as you keep your balance, it's enough to actually lose focus, perfect focus. So these things are really, really tricky for any camera's autofocus system to actually nail it. And in the future video, which I should do as soon as my 51.2 AI lens arrives, which is manual focus, and I'll do another video about that lens and manual focusing, you'll see why whenever I'm taking a portrait shot, which we'll get onto shortly in a moment, I use manual focus, because relying on any form of autofocus to get critical focus is really asking so much. And I prefer manual focus. Right, anyway, I'm waffling. 2.5, no, we don't want 200, we want 100. Absolutely stunning, absolutely brilliant. And for portrait shots, head and shoulders, from sort of, well, this shot here, okay, that for me is a portrait shot. I would usually use 2.5, because you simply don't need, this is 1.4, you simply don't need the background blur. You've got enough blur, maybe not 2.5, but certainly at f2 there's enough background blur, I think, and you've improved the sharpness to a ridiculously sharp image. But again, it's so critical. The difference in distance from the camera of the top of this eyelash to the bottom here, I don't know, it's probably not much, it's probably a millimetre, maybe 1.5 millimetres, and yet the focus peaking, as I say, zoomed in, it moves back and forth simply by breathing on the camera. So trying to get critical focus on a model's, your subject's eyelashes, it's a really tough call. Moving on. No, I've done that. Sorry, moving on. Right, the 135 f2 defocus lens at f2. The ultimate, for me, portrait lens. And this has really blown me away, because this is at f2. This is wide open. And I always thought the lens was a bit soft, because when I'm using this in real life at a wedding and I'm taking shots like this of the bride and then the bride and groom together, but as close up as this, and by the way, I say close up, I was actually about 15 or 16 feet back from the tailor's dummy here, so by no means close, but I now realise that almost all of my issues with any portrait shots I do is not to do with the lens, it's to do with the autofocus system of the camera, because this is the sharpness of this lens wide open. And if you're not stunned, well, you should be. It's absolutely amazing for a, what is this, a 30-year-old design lens. It's absolutely superb, and it just confirms to me that whenever I'm using this lens in future, I have to use manual focus. You cannot get that level of sharpness and detail and accuracy with any camera's autofocus system, or at least you're not going to get 100% of the shots in. I get, when I'm autofocusing with this, I probably get 50%, and that's why. If we stop down to 2.5, which obviously isn't much difference, the sharpness goes even more off the scale, and the level of detail is absolutely beautiful. Right, and the background at f2.5 isn't really much different to f2. So I think probably I've learnt something here. I will shoot probably that 135 lens at f2.5 most of the time rather than f2, just to get that tiny bit more sharpness. Not that you really need it. What I then did, I realised that on the 58mm lens I hadn't done a portrait shot, and one of the things I was keen to find out was whether or not the 58mm lens is a lens that lends itself to being used for portraits. And if we, sorry, wrong one. If we look at the 58mm lens at 1.4 and compare that to the 135 at a similar sort of, to get a similar sort of shot, you can see the 135 obviously smashes the background to pieces. The 58, I think the 58 and obviously the 50 would do the same. When you get closer in, it gives a pretty nice background as well. I don't see any issues with that. I would be very happy with that as a portrait shot. And at 1.4 it's popped into focus, and that is stunningly good as well. That is absolutely gorgeous. I had doubts that the 58mm lens was giving me tack sharp images every time. And of course with the 58 I tend to use autofocus all of the time because I don't do many shots that are so critical on focus. But this again just shows to me, I've learned something, that it's necessary to get wonderfully sharp shots by using manual focus. And I'm just getting rid of, I didn't expect to see it there, a bit of chromatic aberration on that, on the lash. That seems to have gone. Right, so I'm very happy with the 58 1.5. The image look between, where's it gone, the 58, so that's the 51.4 and I want the 58 1.4. So 51.4 at 1.4 on this side, the 58 1.4 on this side. This lens cost £1,650, this one £340 I think. And as a final reminder before we sign off, just a quick look at the sharpness of both of these on this particular shot. Okay guys, sorry I had the same issue that this reference view wouldn't render and become sharp. So we've now got the 51.4 over this side, the 58 over this side. Sharpness. Do you know what? I'm going to plump for the 50 as being a tiny bit sharper, a little bit more detail than the 58. So it wins on both sides. It wins on image quality, image appearance. So which lens wins the lens of the day, which is going to be my favourite, most loved lens from now on, having done this as scientific as I get test. It's going to be, I think, the 50 1.4 G lens, shot at 1.4. There's the 58 at 1.4. Goodness me, it's hard to call. It's hard to choose, isn't it? I'm not sure which one of these I'm going to keep. One is going to go. Should it be the 58 I keep, or should it be the 50 I keep? 58 or the 50? You tell me what you think. I'll be interested to hear your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you found that useful. And please subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll get notified when I do the lens, the look at the 50 1.2 AI lens. And I'll do a similar sort of thing to this, and probably come back and compare it to one of either the 50 or the 58, just to see how it compares image-wise. Thanks so much for watching.